I never even met him. I didn't know his name or face. I was blissfully unaware of his very existence. I will never know why or when it started. I'm glad for that, I guess. I moved into my very small apartment in February of last year. My landlord, Olivia, was a sweet older woman who would cook too much food and bring me leftovers. She was great to me, even after I told her my problem. I'm antisocial, but she didn't mind renting to a reclusive young girl who reminded her of her daughter. Every few weeks, she would knock on my door and then leave, letting me know she was leaving something for me. I loved that. Not even my family would cook so well. The next morning, I wash and leave her empty containers outside my door, and by an hour or so, she would come back and take them away. My other neighbours seemed fine, but I never really talked to them. I work from home, so any time I was ever forced to go out, I rushed out and into my apartment, avoiding an uncomfortable situation. I loved living alone. It was everything I hoped for. I could just breathe. By April, though, I started noticing things were not right. Things were moving, or plain disappearing. I was convinced it was just anxiety, caused by my new medication and the move. Another side effect was that it made me so drowsy. Since I hated seeing the doctor, I just dealt with it. I took naps during the day now, and eventually stopped caring. That is, until one incident doubled my paranoia. Olivia brought me some sort of Greek tossed salad for lunch one day, and I enjoyed it with my friend, Netflix. I fell asleep in the middle of Portlandia, and I woke up that evening at 5 p.m. per usual. What wasn't usual was that my bedding on the opposite side of me was disturbed. I only sleep on my right side, always. Even more, it felt warm. My first thought was that I must have rolled around a lot, but I knew it was too odd to dismiss. I got up and I searched my apartment, gripping my phone with 911 typed in. Nothing else was disturbed. Everything was exactly like it should be. I let it go. For the next 2 weeks, everything was normal, pardon the occasional misplaced shoe or drawn back shower curtain. I thought about telling someone, my parents, maybe Olivia, but if it's not life or death, I'm not reaching out to anyone. I wasn't scared. I was nervous, perhaps a little stubborn as well, but I stayed. I'm not letting some stupid anxiety ruin my lovely, lonely world. May came, and it was getting worse. My underwear, toothbrush, hell, maybe even my food was being misplaced. Every time I woke up, there was some strange odor in the air. I finally realized this won't go away if I keep ignoring it. I called up my mum, and I begged to come and stay for a few days. When I got home, I told them everything. Saying it out loud solidified any creepy suspicions. That weekend, my dad went to my apartment, and what was found was true horror. Written all over the walls was, "Come back, baby, please." He ran out and called the police. There was no one living in my apartment, but someone definitely had access besides me. The investigation revealed a man, Henry, the son of my landlord Olivia, was in a projected relationship with me. They showed me his confession on tape. He admitted coming into my apartment every night and every day with his mother's extra key. He claimed that we were in love and that he had my permission. He drugged his mother's food that she left out for me, which of course caused my drowsiness, and he would let himself in, watch me sleep, touch my hair, and kiss my shoulder. The leftovers in the fridge were tested and confirmed that suspicion. I was absolutely horrified and disgusted. A man I never knew existed collected my hair, clothes, and trash, and practically lived in my apartment for 4 months. My mum, brother, and I had finally arrived at my grandmother's house after a very boring 7-hour drive. It was a trip we made every year, but not usually around this time. We'd always usually visit around Christmas, but this time it was October, the 18th to be exact. What seemed like 50 or more pumpkins with carved faces adorned my grandma's porch. Halloween has always been my favourite holiday, so I was excited to see that my grandma had made such an effort to celebrate the occasion. We unloaded the car and made our way up the creaking stairs into the near 50-year-old house that my grandparents had built. We were met immediately with the smell of freshly baked apple pie and my grandmother giving us all hugs. She told us not to get too comfortable because we would be taking a small walk down the street. I thought it was rather strange that she wanted to go on a walk, seeing as it was already getting dark around this time. But I didn't want to appear rude, so I just nodded my head and replied, "Okay, sounds good." She led us down the gravel driveway, and we began walking down the street. The neighbourhood itself was in disrepair, and there were a number of vacant and decaying houses. We had ventured a couple of blocks when she stopped in front of a 2-story, obviously abandoned house with a green roof. The place looked like it should almost be considered condemned, as it didn't look safe to even go in. It was a white house, but it had dirt and mud seemingly caked all over the outside, and the wooden porch looked ready to collapse at any time. I could see a few other people arriving to the property on foot, when my grandmother announced to us that it was actually a haunted house that had been set up by a man living in the neighbourhood for Halloween. She said it was the first night that the house would be open to the public, and that it should be opening any moment, as it was now completely dark outside. A huge grin spread across my face. I loved haunted houses, even the ones that are just for entertainment purposes and are not actually haunted. Almost immediately after she'd finished talking, a tall, grungy-looking man exited the house and asked everyone to gather at the front porch. He then proceeded to inform us that he would be leading us into the house and to follow him. We all complied and began walking up the dilapidated steps into the home. We were met by an extremely nauseating stench. I don't really know how to describe it, other than it was the most god-awful, overpowering, eye-watering inducing smell I had ever encountered. We continued following the man. He appeared to be leading us downstairs and into the basement. I remember thinking that was strange, as this was supposed to be a haunted house, not a haunted basement. He threw open the door to the basement, and the smell that I had previously thought was the worst smell my nose had ever had the misfortune to breathe in now seemed like nothing more than child's play. There were a couple of people who even began to gag at the smell. We couldn't see much of anything inside. At least not yet. The man flipped a switch that dimly lit the room. This basement seemed larger than any basement I had ever seen. We made our way all the way down the stairs and just stopped in the middle of the room. The man then put his arm out and sort of pointed towards the wall and began to turn in a circle, as if to profoundly display what he was hanging on the walls. There were fake dead bodies hung on crucifixes all over the walls. My mum moved closer to inspect, and I moved with her. She got very close to one of the bodies and moved her hand to touch the corpse's hand. I remember the look on her face after touching it. She seemed terrified. She grabbed me by the collar of my shirt and ran towards the door, shoving the rest of my family in front of her and pushing us up the stairs and out of the door. I could hear, as we were running to the front door, the rest of the people that entered with us now also quickly exiting the room. Once outside, my mum whipped out her phone and dialed 911, as did seemingly all the other people in the group, as they also pulled out their cell phones. The police seemed to arrive almost instantaneously. They must have had a car nearby or something. They entered the house and walked out with the man in handcuffs. Other police cars had arrived by this point, enough so that they lined the entire block. They ended up taking the man away in a car, and a few officers stayed behind to take written statements from the people who had entered the house. I later found out that the man's name was Donald Van. He was a serial killer who they had been searching for almost 10 years, and the bodies in the house were very much real. I sometimes wonder if we were meant to be his next victims, or if he was just proudly showing off his work to us. One thing I do know, though, is that I'll never forget that smell. It's almost like it's burned into my nose. My dad grew up in rural farm country and had to walk about half a mile to and from a bus stop each day. He was the youngest of 5, and he was in his last year of elementary school, while his siblings were in either middle or high school. This meant he went to the same bus stop as his siblings, but they were picked up and dropped off by the bus at different times. My grandma was a single mum who worked as a nurse and couldn't pick him up, but my aunts and uncles usually took good care of him. There was rarely trouble in my dad's county, besides small things like teens taking tractors out for joyrides. One day, when he was walking home on a stretch of country road on my family's property, he saw a van whiz by him. My grandma's family often let locals drive through as a sort of shortcut, so my dad wasn't too alarmed. That all changed when he realised that the van had pulled in a ways up the road. My dad looked inside the van as he passed it, and saw a gruff, bug-eyed older man. My dad said the look in his eyes was unsettling, like an excited shark setting sight on its prey. "Mister, what are you doing on our farm?" The old man got out of his car and gave my dad some spiel about how his parents had got into a car crash and my dad needed to go with him to the hospital. Alarm bells went off for one single reason. His parents were divorced and his dad lived 2 states away. His parents couldn't stand to be around each other, much less in the same car unless it was an absolute necessity. Thinking quick, my dad then asked, "Did you take my brother Ricky there already?" The old man told my dad, "Oh yeah, I picked Ricky up from school and took him right away." My dad didn't have a brother Ricky. He ran towards his house, cutting across the forest. The old man followed behind on foot, yelling at my dad. My dad was just about to give out from exhaustion when he reached the driveway to his house. He saw that his mum wasn't even home and got scared that the man would try to come inside when he saw his Uncle Buck standing on the porch, cleaning his favourite rifle. This struck my dad as odd, because his mum had told him that Uncle Buck had gone on vacation, and my dad hadn't seen him in months. He screamed, "Uncle Buck, that man's trying to get me in his car." Now, Uncle Buck was a scary-looking guy. He was a World War II vet, with Willie Nelson braids and a ZZ Top beard. He was a biker who drank whiskey and smoked cigars, and won plenty of bar fights. Definitely the kind of guy you don't mess with. He didn't say anything as my dad ran inside the house. My dad watched from his bedroom window as Uncle Buck put his rifle together real quick and yelled something at the man. The old man narrowed his eyes, spun around and hightailed it back. It took my dad a few minutes to calm down before he went back down to the porch to talk to Uncle Buck. But when he went there, he couldn't find Uncle Buck anywhere. When his siblings and Mum got home, he told them exactly what happened. According to my dad, his mum went whiter than a sheet and asked him if he was sure that it was Uncle Buck. Well, sure. He was even wearing that motorcycle jacket he got for his birthday. His mum didn't say anything for a few hours. That night, after dinner, my grandmother explained to my dad that Uncle Buck had died in a motorcycle crash a few months earlier in Florida, and that they buried him in those exact clothes. The rifle that my dad had seen him cleaning was kept under lock and key in my grandma's basement. When Uncle Buck died, they couldn't find the keys anywhere, so the case remained locked. When my grandma went to check the case, it was unlocked and unlatched. My father still doesn't know what to make of this, but I've got to thank Uncle Buck for saving my dad's life. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here today. So, basically, my boyfriend and I live in a flat together, and he's an area manager for a main chain restaurant in England. His job takes him to at least 5 to 8 stores, and sometimes he has to stay late. Sometimes he doesn't get in until around 3 AM, so I usually sort of wait up for him to make sure he's alright, if he wants me to run him a hot bath, and if he wants a coffee or anything. So, I get the usual phone call from him saying, "I'm on my way home. I'll be home in an hour. If I drop call you when I'm closer, can you get a bath running for me, please?" I say sure and hang up. Now, our block of flats has this security door that always gets locked at 10 PM, and as long as you have a main entry key, you're free to come and go without worrying about the door. I'm nestling down to watch some Netflix, with a cup of tea and a cheeky biscuit, when I hear our buzzer to our flat go off. Now, someone outside the main entrance is pressing my number, and I have to press a switch from the inside of my flat that will open the main security door and let them in. I think to myself, it's probably just someone who's forgotten their key and pressed my number quickly. I try to shrug it off. I pause the film I'm watching, and I wait. The buzzer rings again, stops, and then rings again. It sounds like someone is deliberately putting their finger on it and holding it down. Now, our flat is on the 2nd floor, and from our bedroom, we can look down and see who's at the main gate. I jump up, go into the room, and slowly peek to see who's there. I saw 5 well-built, stocky men. This is 2 AM. What the hell are they doing here? Why the hell are they ringing my buzzer? It suddenly becomes clear to me that whoever they were, they clearly didn't live here because they didn't have a key. While peeking at them, I clearly see the front guy put his hand up and press my buzzer. Flat number 4. He's not even touching the other buttons, just mine. Half of me wants to pick up my flat phone and be like, seriously, get lost. I don't know who you are or what you want, but I will call the police. And then the other half of me doesn't want to give away that I'm a girl. It sounds silly, but I'm 23 and I'm quite small. I grab my phone and I ring my boyfriend straight away. He says something like he's 45 minutes away and will be there as soon as possible, but he will call his dad, Luke, who's a policeman, to come over and wait with me. While I'm on the phone, the buzzer is still going. He tells me to just keep peeking at them and to see if I can make out any distinguishing features. After what seemed like ages, my boyfriend's dad turns up, and I see him walk straight up to the guys and start a conversation. My boyfriend's dad already has a security key. We gave him one in case we were ever locked out, and he opens up the door to my flat. Straight away, he runs over to me and makes sure I'm fine. We're sitting down, having a cup of tea, and I ask him what was said and what was happening outside. He says he walked up to the main door, and the conversation went like this. They said to him, "Hey man, do you live here? Do you think you could let us in?" Luke replied with, "Well, clearly if you don't have a key, you don't live here, so no. Who are you supposed to be seeing?" "Well, my main girl lives in number 4, and she's gone to sleep. You know how late it is. These are my friends, and they don't have anywhere to stay, and I haven't got a key. So, how about you let us in?" That's funny, because my daughter lives there. "Oh yeah? Shit, dude. Well, how about letting us in, and we can go and see her together?" Luke said, "Right. Now I don't know what you're planning to do, but seriously, stay the fuck away from these flats. You clearly don't live here. If you ever come here again, I will personally arrest each and every one of you wankers. Now fuck off and go home, because I swear to God I will beat the shit out of you guys so bad, no one will recognize you." And with that, the group of guys took off, and Luke managed to open the door freely and get in.
My daughter's been trying to warn me for weeks. I really should have listened. "Daddy? I think there's a monster in the attic." I gave my daughter a tired smile. It was the best I could do at this point. She'd been doing this for weeks now. Every night I'd come and tuck her in, switch the nightlight on and kiss her goodnight, when she would pull the blanket tight under her chin and tell me about the monster living in the attic of our house. Eyes wide, lips quivering. She would shake her little head furiously and insist that she could not possibly go to sleep until I got up and checked. It wouldn't matter how much I tell her that it's all just in her head, and that monsters aren't real. If I don't check the attic, she'd wake up screaming and crying just past midnight, every single time. It's not like her fears were completely baseless, as we had all been hearing odd skittering noises coming from up there at night. Probably rats. No monsters that light-footed. "Please, Daddy, could you go and check?" she whispered, afraid that the thing upstairs would eavesdrop and get mad at her request. "Okay," I replied. There was no harm in indulging this little quirk of hers for at least a little longer. After all, the day when she would stop asking me to check for monsters and slam the door shut in my face wasn't all that far away. I just wished it wasn't the attic, though. Why can't the damn thing live in her closet like a normal monster? Like a bored robot carrying out its daily task, I trudged out of her room, yawning as I reached the attic door, before sliding the ladder down and climbing up, one rickety rung at a time. I popped my head into the cramped space, slipped my phone out of my pocket and turned on its flashlight. Motes of dust shivered in the pale glow cast by the phone which illuminated the attic. Cardboard boxes covered in tattered rags. My wife's old easel and some broken furniture filled up the tiny attic, but no monsters. "All right, honey," I said after coming back down to my daughter's room. "I've checked. No monsters again tonight. Maybe we'll find them tomorrow." She grinned, relieved. "Thank you, Daddy. Good night, love." "Good night." Groaning and rubbing the crick in my neck, I entered our bedroom and plopped down on the bed belly first, mushing my face into the pillow. "Is Daddy back from fighting monsters?" my wife asked, slight mirth dancing in her tired voice. I grunted. "Yep." Kicked its little ass and sent it scurrying back to hell. She chuckled, and then turned over to the other side, her back facing me. I shut my eyes and got ready to go to sleep, when I was rudely interrupted by the critters in the attic skittering around like kids hopped up on candy. Freaking bastards with their little rat paws slapping against the wooden flooring of the attic. "Babe, you really need to get rid of those rats." I nodded, then realized she couldn't see me. Yeah, tomorrow. She sighed and shrugged her shoulders. Soon her breathing slowed down as she fell asleep. I wanted to follow her into the dream world, but my stiff neck wouldn't allow me to do so. I tossed and turned, before finally realizing I'd have to lie on my back if I were to have any shot at catching some sleep. And I hated doing that. I hadn't slept on my back in ages, but the ache in my neck forced me. And then that damn skittering again. Heck. I rubbed my forehead, wiggled my shoulders, and opened my eyes. And saw who, no, what had been making that noise for all those weeks. Up on the ceiling, I spotted a figure. White, but hidden by the dark. I froze. What the heck? It shifted, and there was that sound again, like claws scratching wood. My heart beat faster and my body erupted in sweat. What the heck? What the heck? Hands trembling, I reached for my phone and gently swung it around, shining the light on the figure on the ceiling. The light fell upon a face. Old, wrinkled, framed by matted locks of white hair that flowed down like the aerial roots of an ancient tree. It was an old woman, dressed in white, leering down at me, her fingers digging into the wood of the ceiling. I gasped, and the grinning woman turned and crawled out of the room, moving across the ceiling like a messed up spider woman, before disappearing into the hallway outside. I jumped out of the bed and ran out into the hallway, letting my eyes scan each and every inch of the walls outside. But there was no one there. It was like she had disappeared. I would have almost believed that I had dreamt it all up if I hadn't noticed the long claw marks on the ceiling and felt my stomach drop. And that's when I finally understood that for all those weeks that we had been hearing those sounds, it wasn't some rats skittering around. It was that woman, looking down at our sleeping bodies, watching, grinning.
I was 19, staying late at the college darkroom to develop some film for my photography class. The photography building, once a tobacco warehouse, was a dark, rickety hulk near some lonely railroad tracks in a little travelled part of campus. I finished developing my film close to midnight and headed out, nervous as always to be alone at night in this deserted part of town. It was dark. Several of the streetlights around the parking lot were out, and the few that remained were phoning it in, putting out a weak flickery light that did nothing to reassure me as I headed towards my car. I heard him before I saw him. A scrape of feet on asphalt. He said, "Hey, can you do me a favor?" I startled and dropped my keys, and he mumbled an apology for scaring me. I noticed he was wearing a jogging suit and was walking with a limp. "What do you need?" I asked. He hobbled a step or two towards me. "I think I sprained my ankle. Could you take me to the emergency room?" The university hospital was a short distance down the road. I hesitated. The guy looked perfectly pleasant, and he did seem to be in pain. But I had recently finished a book about a serial killer called Ted Bundy, who lured some of his victims by pretending to have a broken arm and asking for their help carrying books to his car. When they leaned over to put his stuff in the passenger seat of his VW Bug, he knocked them unconscious with a crowbar and stuffed them inside. This scene played across my mind as I looked at the guy. It also occurred to me to wonder why the hell anyone would want to jog in this creepy part of town. So I said, "I'm sorry, I can't do that, but I could call someone for you. There's a phone in the photography building there." "There's nobody to call. I just moved here. I don't really know anybody. Can't you just drive me? It's right down Limestone Avenue." He leaned against the car and winced as he reached down to rub his ankle. I offered to call an ambulance for him. "No, I can't afford that. I don't have health insurance. Can't you just drive me? I'll pay you $20. There was something in the way he said this last bit. Something wrong. Like that exercise in my acting class, where we had to recite Mary Had a Little Lamb, as though we were delivering a tragic monologue or a furious rant. There was a tone rising up that didn't quite match the words he was saying. A raw urgency that reached down inside me and hit the panic button hard. There was a moment of silence between us. "I can't help you," I said. "I'm leaving." I gripped my keys, slipped them between my fingers the way my mum had taught me, so I could use them as a weapon if he came at me. I kept my eyes on him as I speed walked the last few feet to my car. He watched me drive away, still leaning against the car, a flat expression on his face. Away from the dark parking lot, driving through campus with my music turned on, the fear faded. I started to feel a little guilty for leaving the guy there, although I knew I'd done the thing that my mum and dad would have wanted me to do. I was about to turn into my dorm parking lot when I realised I needed to pick up some stuff for my breakfast the next morning, so I turned around and headed back in the direction I'd come. About a minute down the road, my stomach clenched. There was the guy in the jogging suit, running along the sidewalk. His ankle was perfectly fine. Later that summer, 2 students at my college were attacked by those same railroad tracks. The girl survived, but her boyfriend died. The man who attacked them was a serial killer, dubbed the Railroad Killer by the police. He murdered dozens of people across several states, most of them near railroad tracks. I didn't see his mugshot on TV until years later, but the picture broke me out in the same icy sweat I felt when I saw that guy running down the street. I can't be 100% positive, but my gut tells me I escaped a serial killer that night. I'm from the Netherlands, and last year, my friends and I were having a party. I use the word party very loosely. It was just a few stupid 18-year-old dudes getting drunk at one of our friends' places. His family's rich, lived in the Rijswijk, and had a house with a good-sized garden. So, when we were hanging at this guy's place, we always had a blast. Eric, the guy whose place we were hanging at, suggested that we explore the deep web together. He had downloaded Tor, and had been looking around on it for the past couple of days, and figured it would be fun, just for laughs. Most of us hadn't even heard of the deep web before, so when he explained to us what it was, our drunken asses were totally in. So he shows us all of the common sites that you've probably heard of. After a while, we started going off-road, and looking for some obscure, crazy things. We found people selling drugs, a bunch of those hitmen services which look pretty fake, even a site where you could have a box full of actual shit mailed to someone. That one was particularly funny at the time. Still sort of is. We came across a site in Dutch that was selling animals. Not crazy, exotic animals, but like cats and dogs. Okay, that's pretty weird. Why would you need to be selling such normal pets on the deep web? We were about to click off and find something more interesting, when a chat box popped up on the screen, asking us what sort of animal we were looking for, and if we needed any help. Drunk off our asses, we decided to play along with this random guy who must have run the site, and since he sold dogs, we typed to him in English, "Can you send a bunch of bitches around to my place ASAP?" Our country is highly proficient in English, so he definitely understood our innuendo. He told us to stop wasting his time and to get off the site. We decided to ask a legitimate question. Why are you selling cats and dogs on the deep web? The guy's response really surprised us, as we didn't see it coming. He told us that all of the pets for sale on the site were stolen from their previous owners, and then sold on for profit. The guys behind the site would go around to people's houses, wait for their dogs to be let out into the yard, steal their designer pets, and then sell them at a major discount. We asked him why he did it, and he said it was surprisingly lucrative. Since some breeds can be really expensive and sought after, there was a lot of demand. They also stole cats, which he said were much easier to get a hold of, since owners kept much less of an eye on them. What was our response to this? Well, we were drunk, so we started calling him an arsehole. He didn't respond well to this, calling us pussies and saying we'd never say such a thing to his face. He wasn't eloquent or anything, he just typed like some sort of thug. At one point, Eric, who was typing, was saying that if the guy had any pets of his own, he would realise how messed up what he was doing was, and that he'd fuck up anyone he caught trying to steal his cat. There was a slight pause before the guy simply replied, "Okay, I'm coming to get it, and you won't catch me." Bullshit, we all thought. Firstly, what are the frigging odds that this jerk-off would ever do anything? On top of that, what are the odds that he even lives close by enough for it to be worth his while? So we figured, screw it. We kept berating him and calling him an arsehole in a variety of ways. After a while, he stopped responding with his empty threats, and just went silent. We kept typing, but since he wasn't responding anymore, we got bored quickly. A week or so passed, and I get a call from Eric that chilled me to the damn bone. Turns out that the guy's threats weren't so empty after all. His mum had gone to let the family cat, Cubus, into the house the night before, but it was nowhere to be seen. She figured that it just wanted to stay out for the night, so the family went to bed and thought no more about it. The next morning, when she opened the front door, right there on the doorstep was Cubus, almost totally skinned. It may have taken them a while longer to realise that the bloody mess was their cat, had the skin and fur of the tail not been left on as to help them identify it. The guy must have traced Eric's IP address, located his house, waited to find out which cat was his, and then caught it when no one else was watching. Maybe he was planning on stealing it, but figured that the breed wasn't worth taking, so he'd just send a message instead. We also don't know whether he really did live close by, or got someone else to do his dirty work. The thought of him living close by is pretty horrifying, as is the thought that he was watching Eric's house, or at least someone was. We didn't fully realise who we were messing with. Sorry, Cubus.
A few years ago, more like 10 years ago, I used to be big into visiting weird websites. I had a lot of time on my hand, due to not playing sports, nor did I volunteer for anything at all in high school. I told my friend Mark that I was starting to get bored. Honestly, I was bored with what I was experiencing on these websites. He said I should go on the deep web. He and I used to go on the deep web, but never found anything. So I decided to search through some more stuff, a little deeper. I searched for hours every day for about 2.5 months. Still nothing that I hadn't seen already. I told Mark, and of course he said just visit the dark web. When I did go on the dark web, I saw chat rooms, all with different names. I came across one named I, as in EYE. It was all in caps. I entered the chat, but before entering the live chat, you are assigned a number. Mine was P34. I confirmed my number and entered. There were hundreds of people. The comments were coming in quick. At first, I didn't understand what was going on. The screen was black, then a name popped up on the screen that said Mr. Wiggles. The comments immediately stopped and a voice came over my speakers. "Welcome, P34. Then his name disappeared off of the screen and the comments continued, everyone giving me welcomes. A few minutes go by, then a countdown from 10 pops up on the screen. Then the chat goes crazy. Once it reached the number 1, the screen went straight to what looks like a view from a camera just watching someone in what looks like at their home. I sat there watching this for 20 minutes and nothing happened, so I shut down my computer. The next day I went to school, had a normal day, went to Walmart, then I went home. I decided to go back on the same chat from before. I confirmed my number P34 and again, there were hundreds of people commenting. Mr. Wiggles popped up and just like before, the comments stopped. Across the screen it said, "No new members tonight." Then the countdown started again. Everyone in the chat started going wild. The countdown finished and then it was showing the point of view from a camera again. But it was outside of a school. My school from earlier that day. At that point I was intrigued. I couldn't tell if it was focused on a certain person or just watching the school. After 30 minutes of watching the video, our school bell rang and everyone started to come outside while whoever was recording was positioned across the street in the car. Once everyone came out, the person got out of the car and started to follow a crowd of kids. Everyone started to split from each other, and the person recording started to follow someone. It was my friend Mark. He had to be at least 100 feet behind him. I started to call Mark, but he didn't answer. I kept calling him as I watched the video, but nothing. The person followed him to his house and sat outside of his house for a few minutes. The man behind the camera finally said, "No parents are home." And he began to walk to Mark's house, rang the doorbell, and waited as he continued to record. A few seconds go by, and Mark opened the door. He looked confused and the guy said, "P34 sent me." And Mark looked afraid, then the camera shut off and everyone in the chat left. So I did too. I called Mark's house phone instead of his cell phone, and his mother answered. I asked for Mark and she said that she thought he was with me. I panicked. I then received a notification on my phone from my Gmail account. It said the sender was Mr. Wiggles. The message was, "I'm getting closer, P34. Mark says hi." I was shocked and didn't know what to do, so I called the cops. They didn't do anything about it because the email disappeared. I haven't been on the dark web since and no one has seen Mark. Still to this day, I receive messages with pictures of me in random places, along with the same written message that said, "It can happen anytime." I honestly wish I never went on the dark web.